Becky Mayer, and welcome to Transitions, Body, Mind, Spirit. Transitions. How many transitions do you go through in your life? I like to use the metaphor of triathlons. I've been doing triathlons 11 years, and what you do is you start with a swim. And you swim, and then you get to your transition area, and then you get on your bicycle. And then you bike, and then you transition again and get into the running. And then, well, that's a metaphor for life. And this show is all about how people change from one thing to another in such a fascinating way. And today, we have somebody who has morphed through more interesting, entrepreneurial, very cool careers. And our guest today is Paul Schatzkin. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you. Nice to be here.
Paul lives in Nashville. And Paul, you have had such a varied career. I believe that you first came to life in New Jersey, in the county that Springsteen is famous for, as in Bruce,
Yep.
right?
I was born in New York, but spent my childhood years in Monmouth County, New Jersey. And anybody who's familiar with Bruce Springsteen knows that Bruce is from Freehold, New Jersey, which is the county seat of Monmouth County, New Jersey. So when people ask me where am I from, I tell them I'm from Springsteen country.
Yay! All right, so you're a northerner, as they say in the South.
I tell people that I am a Yankee by birth, but a southerner by choice.
Ah, right.
I've been in Nashville now for 20 years. This is my 21st year. I observed my 20th anniversary in Nashville just last February.
Wow. And you and your wife Ann live in Pegram, right?
We live in Pegram, right, just outside of Nashville, but we tell people outside of Tennessee that we're from Nashville. And I've lived here now, I've lived in Tennessee longer than I've lived anywhere else in my life. So now when people ask me where am I from, I tell them I am from Nashville.
Nashville.
Yeah.
And now we're in the It City too.
Right. Well.
Yes.
Yep.
Wow. Well, I'd like to chronologically kind of go through your amazing career. And first of all, you graduated from college and then moved from the New Jersey area to LA and worked as a video editor for Barney Miller, the TV show?
Yeah, I studied, if that's the right word for it, film and television in college. I went to a kind of an alternative college, a branch of Antioch College, which had a reputation as a kind of an alternative, progressive kind of college. And during the late 60s, early 70s, they proliferated some branch campuses around the country. I went to one that was based in Baltimore, Maryland. And this was in the very early days of portable video technology, where what we now carry in our pockets occupied a machine about this big that was the recorder and a camera that was this big, and we were using those to make, just like we're doing now, public access video for cable TV. And when I graduated from college in '73, I then decided to pursue that further, and I went from the East Coast out to the West Coast. And after a time out there, I found a job as a videotape editor on this program that you mentioned called Barney Miller, which was an ABC TV situation comedy that was produced in a very unique way. And the videotape editing was very much a part of the way that show was produced, and we were very much on the cutting edge of the use of videotape and television production in the early 70s.
And was that a fun thing? Did you enjoy that?
There were times when it was fun, and then there were times when it was just insane. Because we were working for a kind of a monomaniacal individual who ran the whole show. We used to joke that the crawl, the credits that run at the end of the show, we used to joke that for the Barney Miller show, the crawl, all it needed to say was written by Danny Arnold, produced by Danny Arnold, directed by Danny Arnold, all parts performed by Danny Arnold, and performed live in front of Danny Arnold. So. He structured the way the show was done in such a way that he could control every step of the production, from the writing, most of which he did, until the editing, most of which he supervised.
Wow.
So we were very much under the command of this one individual, and if the work needed to be done for Danny to come in and see it at 7 o'clock in the morning, we had to work through the night until it was done.
Wow.
So
very demanding.
it was very demanding.
And no freedom.
Actually, the position I had afforded a lot of time because I was coming in at the tail end of the editing process and doing what was essentially a technical job. So somebody else was making the decisions about what material was going into the show, and then I had to come in and do the job of assembling it. And there would be some long periods between when my services were required so I could explore some other things while I was there.
Okay, and so you did that for 2 years, and
that was about 3, almost 4 years.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow. And somehow or other, Hawaii called, and then the next morphing of your career changed, and I think we're going to have some very cool pictures. Tell us what you did in Maui.
Well, the missing ingredient in all that is that I had higher aspirations than simply being a videotape editor, and I thought that perhaps I could do, you know, I wanted to be a producer. You know, everybody in Hollywood wants to direct, and I had different aspirations. And I had latched on, just before I moved out from the East Coast to the West Coast, I had latched on to the story, this unique story of a 14-year-old boy who in 1921 invented television.
14-year-old boy?
He was 14 years old when he got the idea for bouncing electrons back and forth in a vacuum tube, which produced all the video technology that is at our disposal today. And that's a long story, and it goes in and out of my whole path over the course of my adult life. I had aspirations of turning that into what I called the movie for television about the boy who invented it. But we found that there was not much interest, even though it's an inherently dramatic story.
And it's a true story.
And it's a true story. Yeah, it's a very true story.
Wow.
And one of the oddly unknown stories, one of the great epic achievements of the 20th century that we remain largely not knowing about. And just to give you an example of the kind of reception that I got, I mentioned Danny Arnold, who I was working for. And Danny was one of these people who was, in fact, a frustrated film director. As is everybody in Hollywood, they all want to direct, and so Danny's aspiration had been to direct, but poor Danny Arnold, he had been consigned to the realm of television situation comedy where he could only make millions of dollars a year producing television shows. So I went into Danny one day after I'd latched onto the story and we were trying to develop the material, and I said, Danny, I found this amazing story about this 14-year-old boy who invented television. And Danny Arnold chomped on his cigar and said, I'd like to strangle this son of a bitch. So that was the kind of reception we got to that story. And when it became evident that I wasn't going anywhere with that particular vehicle, I felt like my time in Hollywood was kind of running its course. And I tell people I only had enough ambition at that point to become a professional snorkeler.
Oh, wow.
And I remember one day in particular, I had been to Hawaii for the first time, I think, in '79. And I had a hot tub in my backyard, and I had these little plastic fish in this hot tub. And I just remembered thinking, you know, I need to see more fish. And in the spring of 1980, my then future ex-wife and I went to Maui for a 3-week vacation, and I was there for 14 years.
Wow, 14 years in Hawaii. And that's when you developed a charter boat business?
Yeah, again, it comes back to this idea of I had only enough ambition left to become a professional snorkeler. And the way one did that was buy a boat and take people snorkeling. And that's exactly what I did. I found an existing business, I acquired the business, and then built that business from 1 boat to 2 boats, and I grew and ran that business from 1980 until 1988.
It sounds ideal. Was it wonderful and great?
Well, you know, except for the parts where people get seasick and you have to clean up after them, except for the parts where the business slows down because the weather closes in. There were times when it was just absolutely sublime. I can remember several occasions when I would get the boat out of the harbor and there'd be a nice moderate breeze coming on shore, and I'd set the sails and I'd sit back and I'd wonder, oh, what else do I have to do?
Wow.
So,
was it a moneymaker for you?
it was a moneymaker in the end. It sustained itself during the time that I was running it. There was a kind of a real estate proposition where I had acquired some property that I was running the business out of, and as the economy of Maui grew in the 1980s, when we got there in 1980, the side of Maui that lived on, what's called West Maui, the Lahaina side, there was 1 traffic light on that whole side of the island. It was still largely undeveloped. And when I left 12, 13 years later, there was one traffic light for every year we'd been there. So that was how we measured the amount of development there had been in Maui over that time. And then the slips that I had, the parking spaces for the boats on the front row of the harbor, which is a very small harbor catering to a fairly large tourism population, they became pretty valuable. So it paid off in the form of a speculation at the end.
So why did you, after 14 years, decide not to be there anymore? And was there lots of partying and stuff going on in your life? Tell us about that.
It was what we like to call a very enabling kind of lifestyle.
Enabling?
Enabling, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a resort environment, and when you're living in a resort
Drinking,
environment,
drugs, sex, love, all the above?
You know, all the above. It was kind of an extension of the endless adolescence, I suppose.
Yeah.
And then if you want to talk a little bit about that transition, it was basically in the fall of 1987 that basically the drugs and alcohol wore off. And that was the beginning of my transition out of Maui.
We're off, meaning you...
I was basically, well, I was stoned from 1969 until 1987.
In Maui, Wowie, right?
Yeah, Maui was, you know, it was plentiful. And in 1987, I had a couple of false starts in a 12-step program, and I had the last drink that I've had was on Thanksgiving Day in 1987. So I just celebrated my 26th year of sobriety. So that's the essential story there is I tell people the drugs and alcohol wore off, and so I decided to give reality another try. But I was only willing to concede to reality to the extent that I was going to play my guitar. So in 1992 and 93, I went back to Los Angeles, and I spent 2 years in vocational music education programs. And I learned all the argumentative and demolished chords and scales on the guitar. I mean, I studied guitar and music for 2 years, and that's when somebody put the bug in my ear that eventually brought me to Nashville.
Wow.
So I've covered a lot of territory there.
Yeah. So you must have made enough money from your boat slips to not work for 2 years in LA?
Yeah, exactly. So the people that bought the business from me were paying me off over a period of time.
Oh.
So there was a little window of opportunity there. And I had studied guitar a little bit when I lived in Los Angeles in the 70s. And it was just the thing that kind of rose to the surface when other factors were eliminated. That was the thing that seemed to hold my attention. So there were a couple of kind of vocational training programs in music for people that were serious about trying to pursue a career in music, concentrated programs. One was called the Grove School of Music, and I enrolled in the Grove School of Music at the beginning of 1992. And unfortunately, the Grove School of Music went out of business while I was there. They had fallen on difficult financial times. And the Grove School was a good place because it was a little more adult-oriented than the other program that was available, which is called the Guitar Institute of Technology. It was part of a place called the Musicians Institute, which is a fairly well-known program of this sort. Fortunately, the state of California had a tuition recovery program. So when the Grove School went out of business, I was able to recover my tuition and enroll in the Musicians Institute.
How nice.
So I then spent 6 months at this other program called the Guitar Institute of Technology. My mother always thought that I was going to go to MIT. So you can imagine her disappointment when she found out I was going to the GIT. So I spent 2 years in LA in 92 and 93.
And that was the impetus. Wow, from charter boat owner to, hey, I want to be a musician, and really get a degree in it.
Essentially,
and then that made you go, how about Nashville?
Well, the seed for Nashville was actually planted during the fall of 1991. My wife at the time and I, we would try to make a trip every year to the East Coast in the fall so that we could experience a change of seasons. Because you really don't, the seasons in Hawaii are hot, or are warm, warmer, and warmest. So we would come east every year, and in the fall of 1991, we found ourselves in the Atlanta area. And we actually had tickets. We got tickets for the very first World Series game ever played south of the Mason-Dixon line, which was Game 3 of the 1991 World Series between the Atlanta Braves and the Minnesota Twins. And there's a long story about why I was a Braves fan, which is essentially because that was the only live television we got in Hawaii in the 1980s.
Wow.
Yeah. Turner Broadcasting was the only live television we got. The rest was all on tape delay. So when I visited that area in the fall of 1991, I think that's when the seed was planted of the attractiveness of this general region. And I was already thinking that I might want to relocate at some point to somewhere in the South. And then I had met an instructor at GIT who was actually a vocal instructor and become friends with him. And sometime, I think in the late summer, early fall of 1993, he just said he was going to Nashville. And kind of like the light went on, I thought, oh, Nashville, I could go to Nashville. Keep in mind, this is the early 90s. We're still in the height of the class of '99 school of country music during what Steve Earle has referred to as the credibility scare. And country music, you know, I was listening to some country music. And I liked that it was all seemingly acoustic guitar based, which was pretty much my orientation. So it just made sense to come to Nashville. And I got to visit between the Christmas and New Year's of 1993. My mother actually got remarried. She was 73. I think her husband then was 83. Wow. They were getting married in Washington, D.C., so I flew back for that wedding and took some time off on the way back and flew into Nashville and spent 3 or 4 days here between Christmas and New Year's. Not the ideal time to visit Nashville. It was kind of a rainy, sleety kind of time here. But something about the size and the atmosphere of the city very much appealed to me. One of my strongest recollections from that experience was when you get on the plane to fly from Nashville back to Los Angeles. As soon as your plane leaves the ground in Nashville, you're surrounded by rolling green countryside as far as the eye can see. It was beautiful. And even in the winter, when it was kind of gray and a little dreary. And then you start flying west, and you get about an hour outside of Los Angeles, and everything starts turning brown.
Right.
And so that was one of the deciding moments for me.
So you moved to Nashville, and were you working as a musician? I mean, what did you do?
I wasn't really working. I was playing music. You know, working as a musician in Nashville is a
There's a lot of them.
It's a steep climb. Yeah.
Yes.
I do think there may have been some occasions when I actually got some money for playing. Yeah. But what I discovered when I came to Nashville was the vast pool of untapped talent, unrecognized talent that subsists just beneath the thin crust of the mainstream music industry.
Right, right.
That was the revelation for me.
The people that go to the Kerrville Music Festival.
Kerrville became,
the people who don't have the big record deal.
The people who populate the songwriter nights all over town. That's what I did when I came to town, was I went to songwriter nights all over town. So that was one factor that very much motivated when I got here. The other thing that was pertinent at the time was that the internet, as we now know it, was bubbling into public consciousness. And I knew of it because I had been online one way or another since 1979.
Wow.
I got my first computer and got online in 1979.
So you always had a technical bent.
Yeah, I remember very much the first time I sat down at a word processor and I typed out a sentence on a word processor, and then I hit what on a typewriter was the backspace key, and you hit the backspace key on a word processor and the whole line just vanishes from the screen. And I knew in that moment why I had been born in this century. So yeah, I gravitated toward computers very easily.
Well, the cool thing is that because of your knowledge of music and your technical background, you and 2 others started a company, right? Yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, that was the kind of the defining moment, the provident moment was those 2 factors, recognizing that there was this vast pool of unrecognized talent and that this medium was bubbling into consciousness. I suspected that there was a business opportunity there. And I was surfing the internet one night, you know, this is, you know, in the days when browsers went at like 2,400 baud or maybe 1,400 baud. I mean, things were slow.
Right.
If you had an image to download, you had to wait a while for it. But I discovered a record store based in Atlanta called Rainy Day Records. And their website said, Rainy Day Records uses our storefront here in Atlanta and this website to promote independent recording artists from the Atlanta area. And that's when the light bulb went on. I thought, my
You
God,
could do that.
if it makes sense to do something like that out of Atlanta, it makes a world of sense to do it out of Nashville.
Absolutely.
So a couple of nights later, I was at the song circle that you and I have
Mike
populated,
Williams.
Mike Williams' house, literally 2 or 3 nights later, and I started asking people, what would you think if I tried to sell some of your CDs on the internet? And most of them asked me, what is the internet?
Wow, you were so ahead of your time.
This was, yeah.
Yes. So you ended up doing that. And
Yeah,
what was the name of the company?
there were 2 people who knew what I was talking about. One was Tom Kimmel. Tom had actually participated in a series of song circles that had gone around, a circuit that had gone around the country, sponsored by a man named Alan Rawith, who hosted what was the folk DJ list on the internet. This is one of the things that was on the internet, was this listserv that catered to this vast pool of untapped talent, not only in Nashville, but all over the country. Now we're seeing that it's everywhere. Tom had participated in one of those, it was called the Internet Quartets. So a group of 4 people would travel around, and they had been organized over the internet, so they called it the Internet Quartet. So Tom recognized what I was talking about. I had met Tom at the Bluebird. He had played a song that I liked, and he and I struck up a friendship, and he was one of the few people in town that I could actually trade email messages with over a service called CompuServe.
Right.
We're talking 1994, 95 here.
So tell us the gist of, you set the company up. It was successful. In fact, so successful, Gaylord bought it.
Yeah, we spent 4.5 years. So I formed a partnership with Tom, and then he introduced me to a fellow named Michael Camp.
Right.
And there's a wonderful story there, because I didn't recognize the name. And once we got to talking, before I had met Michael, we were talking over the phone, and suddenly it dawned on me that he had played a song that I also recognized from Mike Williams' Pickin' Party. So Mike Williams' Pickin' Party is the genesis.
That was the catalyst.
That was very much the catalyst for the whole thing.
So tell us, Gaylord bought it.
Well, we started in the spring of 1995.
Right.
We just started building websites. We went out and we learned how to program HTML so that we could create websites. We actually had to find somebody, a computer scientist at Vanderbilt, who created this prototype e-commerce system for us, so that we could actually sell CDs and ship them from the internet.
So
and I'm pretty sure, you'll have to let me get this point in, that I'm pretty sure, and nobody has challenged me on this yet, that when we started selling CDs over the internet in 1995, in June of 1995, this was the first time music from Nashville had been sold over the internet. So this was Nashville's first internet music business.
Well, because we still have so much of your life to go through here. So basically, you sold it, and can we say that you guys became millionaires because of it?
You can, yes.
Yes, now that.
Yeah, we built the business for 4.5 years, right through the whole internet bubble period, which I like to refer to as the period when the concept of burn rate replaced the concept of cash flow as a viable business model, thus rendering the period of beautiful nonsense. And Gaylord Entertainment came down and they offered us 7 figures for the business. And we said, okay.
That is wonderful.
Yeah.
So
I went to work for Gaylord for a year, and that's how long it took him to kill the business.
So it ended.
Yeah.
It was called
It was Songs.
Songs.com?
.com, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So there you are again with a nice chunk of cash, like you did in Hawaii, and a chunk of cash. And then, okay, so what have you been doing?
Yeah, well.
We have 3 minutes to go through where.
We have 3 minutes? We've been talking for 24 minutes?
Yes.
God.
I told you.
Well, that story I was telling you about the boy who invented television, a publisher came to me and offered me a publishing deal for that book.
Okay,
so I went into the period, I spent the aughts as a biographer of obscure 20th century scientists. That book was published in 2002. Then I was going to do a sequel, which is about a man named Thomas Townsend Brown. That turned into a rabbit hole that sucked 6 years out of my life before I finally came to the conclusion that I was writing the biography of a man whose story cannot be told.
Whoa!
So that the first draft is available. It touches on all the mysteries of the 20th century, UFOs and the national security state, and all manner of unresolvable mysteries. So I wrote a 572-page first draft, and your job now, Becky, is to ask me. So Paul, what's that book about?
What's that book about?
It's about 572 pages. So,
wow.
So I put that aside. It's been several years now since I put that aside, and then owing largely to an event that happened last year, I've been doing photography for the last year and a half.
So now your hat is photographer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about how, didn't you just have something at a gallery?
Yeah, I've had my first gallery show
yes.
at a gallery in the arcade. It's only open on Saturday afternoons from 1 to 4. It's called the O Gallery. It's on the top floor of the arcade.
Okay,
and
in Nashville, Tennessee.
In Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay.
The arcade between 4th and 5th Avenue, between Union and Dedrick Streets. And it's open during the art crawl, the first Saturday of every month. The next one I think is June 6th or 7th. Yeah. And what I've been doing is I have this almost inexplicable attraction to medieval ruins.
Medieval ruins?
Medieval ruins. There tends to be a shortage of those here in Middle Tennessee, so I have to go to Europe for those.
So you go to Europe and take pictures?
I went last spring. I spent 2.5 weeks in England and Scotland wandering around medieval ruins, photographing them. And then when I came back, I got this inspiration to massage the photos digitally after the effect. So I have these photographs of these medieval ruins cast against starscapes from the Hubble telescope. They're called portals of stone. Portals of stone.
So that's what you're doing today.
That's what I'm mostly doing today. That you can find on the World Wide Web now at Portals of Stone.
Portals of Stone on the World Wide Web, folks.
Yeah.
portalsofstone.com. Yeah. And then is there something next after that that we may know about?
I haven't found that yet.
Okay, well, it's to me this amazing journey that you've put yourself through, and being an entrepreneur, being imaginative, you couldn't really plan it that way. I mean, it just kind of like...
Yeah, but it sounds pretty coherent when you condense it all into 24 minutes, doesn't it?
It does, but it's very inspirational, and I think if anyone goes, gee, I'd like to do this, or I'd like to go to Maui, or you just did it. Well, you just did it.
I knew early on that I was never going to have a conventional kind of existence.
You knew that?
Yeah, that much I knew.
Yes.
I knew that I was not looking forward to the prospect of going to work every day in a necktie.
Yes.
I think my primary purpose in life was probably to never have to wear a necktie.
Never have to. Okay.
And
well,
here we
Paul,
are. Are we done? I'm sorry.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's been a pleasure talking with you. And real inspiration. Thank you. And we have some photos too of some of your adventures, what we're going to tie in. Thank you. This is Becky Mayer for Transitions, Body, Mind, Spirit.